Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Fella Tarot. Welcome to my channel. I'm kind of nervous today because I'm waiting for a very important delivery and it's a tarot deck, as you can imagine. And it's a bit of a surprise, so I'm not going to say what it is, but it's scheduled to be delivered today, and I was really fidgeting and checking the delivery app a couple of times, and then I thought to myself, I watched Pot Never Boil, so it just doesn't make sense for me to not do anything productive because I'm waiting for something. And so I thought that, doing something relaxing for me also means using my tarot decks. And I thought, well, I'm just gonna film a VR today because I love VRs, I make VRs, I respond to VRs, and I think that it's a really funny way to connect with the tarot community. And so I found one that I really enjoy watching, and I thought, okay, I want to jump into this one. It's the Tarot 5 Ws. So the Tarot 5, the Ws are the investigative journalism, are the pillar questions in order for a journalist to be able to be completely unbiased when relating on a fact. So they are the 5 whys: the who, what, when, where, and why. And this is a VR to Brian Cormack Carr. So I'll make sure to link Brian's video in the description box below, but let's have a look and let's have some fun. So as I was saying, the 5 Ws. If you have studied journalism, or you don't even need to study journalism, and nowadays there's so many books that you can actually read for your own pleasure. We don't necessarily have to go to a certain school in order to access them. And that was my case. In my case, I always read a lot of books. I read about 70 to 80 books per year. I have a profile on Goodreads, and it's I always accept any kind of challenge that my friends, let's say my contacts in my list, throw at me, because I always really enjoy reading. And I try my best to read pretty much everything. And I remember I was in my 20s, I was really interested in journalism, not necessarily to become a journalist. I was writing articles, for a magazine at the university. And I wrote a couple of, that was a funny thing, that I actually was so much interested in journalism as in investigative journalism. And so I remember when I moved to London, I wrote a couple of articles about a stabbing that happened in, where was it? It was in one of the northern suburbs. I honestly don't even remember. We're talking about over 20 years ago. But I remember that one of the most important things was to always repeat yourself that the who, which is the prompt, the first prompt for this VR, the who seems like it's the most important thing, but actually it's not. And you may notice that in all of the articles that you read, that obviously you give the name of the person the fact is referring to, but the name is just not enough. So you actually need to give a background. And I remember, thinking about this when I looked at the prompt, and I was listening to Brian explaining what the who prompt was about. And in my case, so it can be anything that is related to a person that makes you think about tarot, really. And in my case, I had to go with the Forager's Daughter Tarot because my who is a dear friend of mine in the tarot community. We've actually bonded, so we've known each other ever since we were probably in our early 20s. And then we also lived together because she came to the Netherlands for a PhD. And I was at the time in which I was living in the Netherlands. And so we actually have, ended up sharing my apartment and for a few months. And it was really nice. But I think that, it's at the beginning it's always a bit difficult because, we just met a couple of years before, but we weren't exactly friends. And what happened was that I found it a bit difficult to share with her that I love tarot. And I think that she felt the same. And we didn't know that about each other at the beginning. So one day I just came out and said it. And I said, you know, I actually have a collection of tarot decks and I read tarot. And she was like, me too. So it was the most amazing thing. And, you know, ever since then, we've been talking about tarot, of course. And our friendship grew around that. Then obviously it grew also for everything else that we share together. But I have to say that it was the most amazing thing, thinking to myself, oh, I really hope she's cool with that, but, you know, it's part of who I am, and for her it was exactly the same. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but bonding over a passion in common is really a wonderful thing. With, you know, with the rest of the world, you get to know these other people the same way that I'm doing now in the tarot community, thanks to the fact that I have this channel. So I'm so very grateful for all of you who are my subscribers and all of you who interact with me with comments or emails. And thank you so much for the generous donations or the presents that I receive. I am so very grateful. It is also very much appreciated. So sorry about the tangent. If you know me, so this is my channel. I do show tarot and oracle decks, and I do readings, and I show you my practice, and I take you through what I do as my healing process with using tarot for grief and trauma processing, but I also talk a lot. So this is me. So the Forager's Daughter Tarot reminds me of this dear friend of mine, because I actually got a copy for her. So she doesn't live in Australia, unfortunately, but she reached out to me and she said, I really like this tarot deck, and can you try and see if you can find a copy for me, because as you can imagine, she lives in Europe, and shipping from the US to Australia and to Europe has been prohibitive in the last couple of years. And I have to say, I am so very thrilled about this deck for another reason as well. And it's also related to the who. So bonding, you know, with creating meaningful connections in the tarot community, because I participated to a giveaway by the author of this deck, Jessica Nye Howard. And I always participate to giveaways, but to be honest with you, I don't necessarily hope that I will win. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of convinced that I will never win. So I tend to participate and then I forget that I actually entered. And then one day I found Jessica's message in my inbox saying, oh, congratulations, you're one of the winners. And I was like, are you kidding? That was the most amazing news. And I was so thrilled. And she was so kind, because I told her, are you sure? Because I live in Australia, and you know the shipping costs are terrible, and I knew that. But she was adamant. She said, no, you won the giveaway, and I'll be happy to send it to you. And I was so very happy. This deck is an amazing deck. It's really beautiful. There are a few editions of this deck. So if you look at this deck now and it doesn't look like the copy you've got, it's because these are different editions. So this is the Afterlight edition, and it also has been reprinted. It was out of print for a while, but it has been reprinted. It has a few additional cards in the major arcanas. It's a nature deck, it's a grounding deck, it's one of those decks that really allows you to do a lot of different kind of work, so it's very versatile. It's one of those decks that I use in my personal practice for divination, as in it's really a good sharp readout, but it's also a really good deck for journaling. It comes with a very fantastic hardcover guidebook with a fully colored page with, you know, the images of the cards, and then it's a nice description of the cards, what happens on the symbols on the card, and the explanation why the symbols are there. And ephemerality, I love this card. And the color palette is amazing. I love the borders. So other editions have different colors for the minor suits. I actually prefer these cream color borders because I do prefer to have this continuity, this consistency throughout the cards of the deck. I just really love everything about this. It's got a really lovely gilding, gold gilding, but it's a high quality one. It's not one of the gildings that will actually, you know, chip very easily. If you can see, there are maybe one or two chips, but that's because I use this deck constantly. And so, you know, we're talking about daily use. So it's kind of, you know, I'm okay with the fact that there's one or two chips, but this is not one of those decks that some of the mass market decks that come to you and are already chipped on the edges. So absolutely relating to the who prompt, this is, you know, the deck that makes me think about this friend of mine, and it is related to tarot because we bonded over tarot. So let's have a look at the next prompt. The next prompt is the what. So the what is also very important, and I think it's a step more important than the who. So the what is referred to anything that, you know, would respond to the word or the question what related to tarot for you. In my case, it actually has to be related to the cardstock of this tarot deck, which is the Yokai Yochi Tarot by Woobleplay. I was so very lucky of having found this copy. It has a really cool story. So originally I missed out on the Kickstarter, and I thought to myself, I'm never gonna get a copy, so, you know, put your soul in peace, because you're never gonna get it. Then what happened was that I had a few additional copies from the Indiegogo campaign of the Healing Waves. And I remember, you know, being ready to let go of one copy. And I went to one of the Facebook groups, and there was this lady from, I don't remember, sorry, if it was from Canada or from the US. I do ship a lot of decks to Canada and the US. And she said, I'm so sorry, I don't have enough money to purchase the deck for the money that I was asking for. But I really love the Healing Waves. It would mean a lot to me. And, you know, if you could just consider perhaps doing a trade. And that really moved me because, you know, for someone to say that a deck meant a lot to them, I thought to myself, I don't necessarily need the money. With the money that I was making selling that deck, I was probably going to spend it on a different deck. So I said, look, I'm happy to trade something, so let's have a look at what we've got. And she had this deck, and she was like, well, I'm happy to trade the Yokai Yochi for it. And I was over the moon, because I thought to myself, that is absolutely perfect. You know, I absolutely would love to have a copy of the Yokai Yochi. And so that's what we did. And when I received it, I had no idea about the cardstock. When I received it, I remember the day in which I opened the box, and I took two cards and I did like this. You hear that whispering sound? That is for me the best auditorial sensation and feeling that you can get out of a deck. So there's a few things that are extremely important for my experience with tarot. And the tactile feel is one of the most important things. The second one is also the sound that the cards make when you just do like this. So it is not for every deck, and it does, let's say there's a reason why this sound is so very peculiar. You probably cannot really tell because, of course, I'm using an iPhone to record this. So if I had a decent microphone, you would probably hear how distinctive it is, this sound. The reason why this sound is so unique is because this deck, the cardstock in this deck is fabulous, and it is a very soft, silky linen embossing. So this is not, now I say embossing, but it could also be printing. I know that there's two different ways to create the linen texture. So if you know what that actually is, if it's rather printy rather than embossing, my apologies for that. The most important thing to notice is that it does have this linen finish. However, it's a completely different linen finish from other decks that we may know of or we may have in our collections. And it is in my personal opinion, which could be, you know, completely different from yours, it is my favorite one. It is my favorite one because it is very subtle. I don't know if I do this, you probably be able to see it. There you go, you probably see it. It is very subtle, very soft, it's very silky, and it still retains a very, how should I explain that? It's a very kind of soft touch feel to the cards. So it is the same on the backs. This is very expensive. It's probably one of the most expensive choices you can actually make when printing a tarot deck. This, or at least right now, because we know that the technology is changing all the time, and so they probably come out with something different in a couple of years. But at present, this deck is not expensive just because, you know, it's a gorgeous deck, it's absolutely beautiful, but it's also because the quality of the product itself is really, really expensive. Now, going back to the fact that I love this deck, it's the Watt. Obviously, the Watt is the cardstock, but it's, to me, whenever I look at it, it's the association with the Japanese culture that I love so much. Actually, recently, I'm reading a book which is by Yokoyama. And what is it called? It's called The North Light. So he is the same author of a couple of other books that I don't remember the title. Was it? I don't remember. I'll you know, but I'll link the book The North Light in the description box below. He's generally a thriller kind of author, but this book it's still a thriller. But it's so very paced and so very comfortable that it doesn't have any type of jump scares. It doesn't have any type of tension. There is obviously, you know, interest. Of course, it's really, it's a page turner, but it reaches that will to turn the page in different ways rather than, you know, scaring you into reading further, which is something that I really appreciate. And it doesn't talk about yokais at all. Yokais are the supernatural beings of the Japanese culture, but it does have that kind of imprint of the Japanese literature that is so very calm and paced that I really do appreciate whenever I'm reading and enjoying a book by a Japanese author. And this deck, you know, is reminding me of that as well. So this deck is my answer to the prompt what, and it's the Yokai Yochi Tarot. The next prompt is the when. So the when is a reference in time to something that is for you related to tarot. And I will have to go to the years in which I spent living in Paris from 1997 to 2000. Or rather, the end of 97 to the beginning of 2001. Now, when I lived in Paris, also when I lived in London, but when I lived in Paris, I was spending many hours. I was there to study, but I was spending many hours just to make some money. I was working all sorts of different jobs, and I was working as a tourist guide as well, which was one of the most whimsical experiences I've ever had in my life, to be honest. But I'm not here to talk about that. So one of the jobs was obviously reading tarot deck, and I was going to Les Halles. Now, if you don't know Paris, Les Halles is a very big shopping center right in the middle or in the central area of Paris. It's got pretty much for everything from the low end of fashion to the really high end of fashion. And I remember it was so much fun because there was, you know, I was there, and there was also a palm reader next to me. So we had these two tiny tables, and it was so very much fun. It was in the 90s, so obviously at the end of the 90s. So obviously back then it would have been, let's say, I don't think now you can actually put your table and a couple of chairs in Les Halles anywhere. I don't think you can do that. Back then, apart from the fact that there were a lot of reconstruction works going on, and it was a bit of a mess, if I have to be honest, I don't know, we never been harassed by police or anyone, and by security. Security was just probably closing an eye what we were doing. We were not the only ones, and to be honest, we were paying together a fee combined, you know, for the right to be there. And there were a lot of others that were selling candles and, you know, stuff like that. I remember especially around Christmas. And it was right around Christmas that, so the Christmas of 1998. And there was this person that came to me for a reading, and she was a very beautiful lady. Should have been in her 50s, I reckon. Very beautiful, statuesque, I would say, absolutely stunning. And she sat down, but she had that air of, there was something that was bothering her. I could tell immediately. She sat down and she just leaned over the desk, almost occupying the entire desk itself. And I kind of instinctively, I took a step back. I leaned back simply because, you know, it's the kind of thing that you do if someone is so occupying your space, whatever. I consider that it was my space. I kind of, you know, I felt like I had to put some distance between us. But that was the last time in which I had that kind of reaction towards her, because after that, what she said really blew my mind. And she said in French that she was there because she wanted me to read cards for her, and her question was, how do I kill my husband and get away with it? And I swear, she looked serious, and she didn't chuckle or anything. So my first reaction was to go, oh you know. At first I was like, maybe I didn't understand her, because my French was, you know, good enough for me to be reading cards, but it was by no means perfect. And so perhaps it was like, maybe that's a slang, you know, it could be a slang and she's just, you know, making a joke or something like that. But she was serious. And then, you know, she kind of relaxed because she saw the puzzled expression on my face, and she kind of relaxed. And she explained to me that there was this really sad story in which she caught her husband cheating, and she was really upset because she dedicated basically her entire life to him. And obviously I'm not going to judge, because I only heard her side of the story, and there's always two sides of a story, if not more than that. So I couldn't really, but we did a kind of instead of doing some kind of a, you know, how to get away with murder kind of reading, you know, we tried to get some reading to get to take care of herself, to get back to nurturing, get back to, you know, relaxing and recuperating all the energies that she'd lost. And that was a really good reading, and she was so very thankful at the end. The deck that I associate with that so the Christmas of 98, is this deck. So this is the Tarocco Indovino by Dal Negro. This is the let's say created and illustrated by Sergio Ruffolo. Obviously it's an Italian deck. It's still in print, but this is the very first copy that I got. As you can tell, it's all brown now. It wasn't supposed to be. Let's say that it was really white originally. It's a really quirky deck. If you have a look at the backs, for example, we've got the zodiac signs, but all the characters are a bit cartoonish. And so it goes, you know, when it comes to the cards as well. So this deck is the one that I used to read when I was in Paris, and I don't think I've ever used it, at least not regularly, ever since then. So to me, this deck is very much related to a very fixed period of time, which was those years in which I was reading, you know, out of Leal. And in particular, I'll always remember, you know, reading for this person, this lady that was so very beautiful, and she was so upset that her husband had been cheating on her, and she, you know, she started a conversation saying, tell me how I kill him and get away with it. And obviously she was making a joke, but she was also being very serious about it, because you could tell the pain. She was trying to make a light comment about it, but she was in actual pain. So this deck is a bit of a different kind of divination system. We've seen the major arcanas, earlier, and the majors are corresponding to the meaning of a traditional RWS. However, when it comes to the minors, the keywords that you see here, so for example, let's see something completely different. So yes, this one is completely different. So we've got, for example, the 8 of diamonds, which is the 8 of the suit of earth, so also the suit of pentacles. And the upright meaning is beauty, bellezza, it's beauty, which is, I'm trying to find any kind of bridge between the meaning of the 8 of pentacles in the traditional RWS and the word beauty, but to be honest with you, unless you're thinking about beauty being a goal for you, doubling down on your work to achieve that, I don't necessarily see that happening, and even that's a bit of a stretch. But what is really, completely different is greed. So the reverse meaning for the 8 of Pentacles, let's say, is greed. Although I do see greed as a reverse meaning of the doubling down, when the motivation that pushes you to really go ahead in your projects, in your planning, in your working really, really hard. If you do that for the wrong, let's say, goal, then greed can be one of them. So it's not completely, let's say, off. But in any case, it's a beautiful deck. It's a beautiful, it's a very nice divination system that makes you, if you are well versed in the RWS tradition, looking at different systems is actually very helpful for you, because it makes you think about a different interpretation of the cards. So this is my prompt for the when. So the next prompt is where. And I have to say, when you've been a tarot reader and a collector for over 35 years, there's a lot of where. There's a lot of places that remind me of reading tarot, buying tarot, discussing about tarot, seeing tarot, pretty much all over the world. And so it's kind of a difficult one. And I was thinking about it and thinking about a tarot deck to associate with, well, the entire planet. And then I thought to myself, why not the tarot landscape? I have been talking non-stop about this deck because it's recently become one of my favorites. It's also because it's a really kind gift by a very close friend in the tarot community. This is by Francesca Matteoni and Yoshimai, who's the illustrator. This deck is recent. It's a recent publication. I don't think it's, at present, it's probably not available in Australia yet. However, you can get it from Amazon US. So I'll make sure to put the link in the description box below. And the reason why I've actually chosen this one for the prompt where is because there are so many places that resonate so much with me in this deck that it has to be this deck for this kind of prompt. Whenever it's related to places, landscape, obviously, it has to be this deck. And it's an absolute joy to look at. It's an absolute joy to read with. It's a very sharp shooter. You will not be disappointed. There is a lot to talk about the cards, because the symbols on the card are very interested. For example, we've got the Emperor with, you would imagine the high rise, the financial area of a city to be related to the Emperor, in the sense of, it's the person that brings back the tidy order after the chaos, but it's also the person that has the authority. So obviously you can imagine these are government buildings, for example, something like that. But what I love about this card is that if you pay attention, there's actually a little spider in here, and that to me is the symbol of everything that is probably not very well known about the Emperor. So the Emperor is the number 4. Let's not forget that in numerology, the number 4 is the number of consolidation. But it's also a number that points out that keeping things together, keeping things in our space, in our area of expertise, or, within our family, within our circle of influence and stuff like that. And that is the function of the spider web. So the spider web is, procuring a home for the spider. It's also procuring food, as we know, because it's very sticky, and obviously when there's a bug that gets caught up, it ends up being food for the spider. So there is this kind of industriosity also related to the spider that is reflected by the emperor and the meaning of the emperor card. And I love the fact that the author, the illustrator, has actually found a way to show both these aspects in the same card. And it wouldn't have been that easy. So I really love what they've done. And I could stay here and talk forever about, these cards, because they are not just really, really beautiful, but as I said, they are so full of meanings. And you can learn so much from noticing these symbols in the cards. But it's also because one of my most favorite things, let's say, in the universe is this card, is the Northern Lights. So I've seen the Northern Lights in a couple of places. I've been to Iceland and I've been to northern, let's say, Arctic Norway, so above the Arctic Circle. I've said this before, so if you heard this story before, sorry about the fact that I keep on repeating it, but it was one of the most exciting moments in my life. And seeing the Northern Lights, not just green, but literally just these colors of purple in the sky, and they were dancing. It means that they were not static, they were moving at a really high speed. So it really looks like they are dancing like that. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I also have to say that it was freezing cold, and by my standard freezing cold, so I think it was minus 25 degrees Celsius. So it was an effort, okay? You could not stay outside for longer than probably half an hour. We had to take turns in going back into the bus with the heater on, because you could actually have, you could get sick, obviously. But it was the most amazing thing, and we were in the northern part of Norway at the end of February 2020, so we were so lucky that we were still able to travel, because we got back on the 4th of March into Australia, and a couple of days after they just closed the border. So obviously this became even more meaningful for us. And I just love this card, and I love all of the cards. There are a few decks that actually show the Northern Lights, and I'm so very grateful for that. Whenever I see a card with the Northern Lights, I generally buy the deck. I do have, one day I should do a video with all of the decks that have a card with the Northern Lights, because I think I have at least 3 or 4. I probably have a bit of an obsession with it, in the sense that, for example, that I like fountain pen inks, and I keep on buying the Diamine branded Aurora Borealis. It's a kind of a teal, kind of green color. And I also listen whenever, for example, I'm just googling Northern Lights, and then I see whatever I can see the theme of the Northern Lights reflected, whether it's in books or songs. And there's a song that I used to listen to about Northern Lights, so I am quite obsessed. But it is one of those phenomena that honestly, it just takes your breath away. And you can see, and there's Southern Lights as well, so we've seen them in one of the southernmost islands in New Zealand. So that was also a spectacle. That was absolutely fantastic, but not as vivid, not as clear as that night in Arctic Norway. So this is definitely, Tarot Landscape is definitely related, sorry about that, is definitely related to the where prompt of this VR, because of the so many places that resonate with me that I can see and identify in this deck. The next prompt, I think, is the last one. Let's see what it is. So indeed, the next prompt is the why. So why do I read tarot? Why do I do anything? To be honest with you, I don't necessarily ask myself that. It is part of me. It's part of who I am, what I've done, my formation, my education, my tradition, my way of looking at life, and my way to bond with others. Why am I on YouTube is probably a different question with a different answer, but with the same theme. So I'm here because I want to share my experience with you. I want to do it in such a way that especially not for the easy or light-hearted stuff, but also for the heavy stuff, because in my practice I use tarot with my clients to heal and to process grief and trauma. And I do believe that when you find yourself in that situation, one of the most important things to point out to anyone that comes to me is that I'm not perfect. I have been through grief and trauma. Even at present, I may be going through something. So I'm not I'm not the kind of healer that, you know, stands back and just gives you direction. I'm actually the person who's empathizing. I am an empath, so I'm always kind of being close to the person that I'm working with. And sometimes I go through their same motions. And it's something that, you know, it's probably not very indicative for my own personal preservation of energy, but this is who I am, this is what I do. So I'm here because creating meaningful connections is one of the most beautiful things you can do for yourself. Creating that bond is the most important thing in order to be able to overcome anything that is overwhelming. Anything that is overwhelming, it could be overwhelming with grief, it could be overwhelming with worry, it could be overwhelming with trauma and everything related to that. So one way to actually gain back your awareness, being grounded, being peaceful and satisfied with yourself, is to surround yourself with something meaningful. And it could be related to your practice, it could be related to people you do your practice with, and so on and so forth. So being in the tarot community for me has that particular meaning. So this is the Energy Archaeology Oracle deck, and that's the deck that I've chosen for this prompt. It is an oracle deck, it's not a tarot deck. I hope it's okay. The reason why I've chosen this is because this is what I use whenever we do some trauma processing. And this is, okay, this is by Ashley Stinson, illustrated by Kelly Finnan. I have to say, this is one of the most useful decks that has ever been published. And this together with the book, you know, in the community for, well, since ever. Because it's really on point. It refers back to a bone of your body, and then it gives you the keyword related to that. If you jump back into the book, you will see some exercises as well. It also gives you a little bit of an let's say a super quick explanation on what this bone is referring to, where it is, what is it responsible for, and so on. And it's something that is, on the one hand, very interesting, of course. A course in anatomy is always very interesting, but it's also very moving and very touching. So I'm going to draw the attention, for example, to this card. So this card is, as you can see, it's the mandible, so the lower part of the jaw. And you can see the teeth here, all of them. So it's clearly the lower part of the jaw. We all know that, we all recognize that, we all have one. Or most of us have one. I've actually worked with my mom has, when she was still alive, one of her friends had cancer in the mouth, and they had to remove the lower part of the jaw. Then they gave her a prosthetic, but for a couple of weeks, you know, she was without the lower part of the jaw. So let's say most of us have it. It's something that we take it for granted, because we've been born with that. We don't necessarily have to deserve it, we just have it. But it's also one of the most important part of our body, because it regulates one of the, you know, essential functions of the body, which is eating. So by chewing your food, you actually make it digestible. It also regulates your speech, in the sense that just the tongue, if you don't have the lower part of the jaw, you wouldn't be able to articulate as much. You will notice that whenever, for example, if you lose a tooth, for example, you will see that there's a different kind of sound produced by your mouth whenever you are pronouncing vowels and consonants. And it's also because, well, in many cases, for example, the lower part of the jaw stands for your your feelings, your emotions that you show on your face, and those are the most difficult ones to hide. The position of your mouth, the way in which you tense your jaw, sometimes you can get to, after practicing, you can get to relax the muscles of your face and perhaps the eye area. But I can assure you that the closing and opening and even grinding sometimes, unfortunately, of the jaw is very involuntary. So much so that we do that during our sleep as well. And, you know, teeth gnawing, for example, teeth grinding, for example, is a sign of something that we really should look into. Now, what I want to draw your attention to is the keyword that says allowing. So allowing is reflecting the image as well. This jaw, lower part of the jaw, the mandible, is used like a dam. As you can see, there is a stream, there is a lake, and the stream is going through the teeth, as you can tell. And if I do this, I'll probably zoom in like that. I can show you that these are let's say small drops of water that come from the lake through the teeth, and they feed this kind of river that comes out of it. So the allowing is from the way in which the world, so the lake represents the world, for example, and obviously inside your mouth is yourself. So you allow something to nourish you, the water that quenches your thirst, for example. But on a metaphor, you also allow very little from the outside, the external world, to penetrate into you in such a way that you can be assertive, you can choose what to let in or not. And that is very important. That is one of the most important functions that you have in your body. So what you put in your mouth, what you feed your body, is extremely affecting you. It's really having an influence on your health as well. And so is on a metaphorical level, everything else that you allow to enter yourself, whether it's in your mouth, through your digestive system, or in your mind, through your thoughts. So that was something that I talk about whenever we look at that card. You know, whenever I'm with a client and the client pulls that card, and we'll start talking about what their diet is, and, you know, also on a more spiritual level, what they let themselves think, if they let themselves be influenced by somebody else's idea about them, and so on and so forth. And that is very important, and it is only thanks to this deck that I can actually do that, because it's a very complex kind of work. And if you don't have a visual aid in order to be able to do that, it's not always let's say it's not always feasible. So this is the Energy Archaeology Oracle deck, and it is my pick for the prompt why. So this was so much fun. I hope it was fun for you as well. As I said, it was the hashtag Tarot5Ws, and it's a VR to Brian Cormack card. I will put in the description box below the links to all of these decks if you want to purchase them. That was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end of the video. More to come. Have a great day.